Welcome. We're going to do a deep dive walkthrough of the new NMLS test content outline. This is the outline that was posted on May 8th. Now, there's a couple things that you need to know before we start diving into this. Anytime somebody says, hey, there's new info or new things going on with this exam, I think it raises a lot of interest and a lot of anxiety at the same time too, right? With this, you need to know that the test itself has not changed. There's routine maintenance to the test. There's questions that are cycled in and out of the test, but nothing new is happening with this except the fact that we're getting a deeper dive into exactly what that testable content is. And I'll give you one example. From the test content outline that we had prior to this, the federal regulations were listed on it. On the screen, you now see RESPA, one of the federal regs, but you have a lot of subtopics underneath that. So the test didn't change. The questions haven't gone through any unusual set of changes. What did happen is that the content that can be tested on is much more specifically being identified. Now, the first thing that we did as a provider, obviously, we looked through this and we're like, hey, is there anything new in here? Is there any info that we didn't have, that we didn't get? And we really didn't see anything in here that's new, okay? What we did see is every once in a while, we'd see some terminology that might be a little different. And when you're studying for this test, you want to know as much as humanly possible. It's funny, this went out on the 8th. All of us at Diehl took it home the evening of the 8th, and we talked about it on the morning of the 9th. But with that, I'll share some of the things that we ran across. We're going to dig into this and really talk about how this can impact you. If you're a branch manager, you're onboarding people. If you're a company owner, you want to grow fast and you don't want people not passing this test. Or if you're an individual that's studying for this and you're going to be in the hot seat and you want to say, hey, what can this do to help me understand better how to perform well on the test? We're really going to kind of focus on those three areas. At the very top of the page, you can see the content area, for example, federal mortgage related laws, and then the percentage of the test that is, 23%. You see general mortgage knowledge and all the rest. Now, if you've looked at the test content outline before, this isn't different. It's just that they put all this up front, which kind of makes it a little bit more clear what the breakdown is and how the test is going to be assembled from these different content areas. Now, overall, what do you need to know? The overall pass rate of the exam right now is about 58%, okay? If you are new to the industry, those folks tend to pull that number down a little bit. If you've been in the industry and you've done a lot of training over the years, maybe you work for a bank and they were really big on this training, then that may be pulling that average up to 58%, right? So kind of keep that in mind. The other thing that you need to know is the subsequent attempt pass rate is under 50%. So if somebody does not pass it on the first time, then there's less than a 50% chance that they're going to pass it after that. Just some things that you need to know. I think the most common reason that we hear that people didn't pass it second time around is that they didn't fully prepare for it in all content areas. They may have taken a look and said, hey, I didn't do well in ethics or I didn't do well in federal, so I'm going to study real hard for the federal stuff. What you need to know is that the test that you get comes from a big pool of questions. It's big enough that you could get many different questions second time around. Plus, you've had 30 days. Just remember that if you're going to do it, make sure that you take it as seriously, if not more, than you did the first time. The ideal scenario is what do you need to do to pass it the first time? I remember a group that we were training, and the folks that were in the group worked for a big insurance company. You'd know their name if we said it. They said, we've taken a lot of 7 Series 63 type stuff. I'd like to know exactly how much I need to study in order to know that I didn't try too hard to pass it. And we said, hey, wait, this works completely different. This is almost the opposite of that. You want to do as much as humanly possible. Get past it the first time if you can. So let's jump into what this is telling us. Under RESPA, it's telling us we better know the RESPA and origins. In other words, what was the motivation for RESPA? Why was it put together? Well, kickbacks were happening in the industry, and it actually was in the real estate industry. Those kickbacks were being used to motivate transactions. And while we always hear RESPA centered around mortgage, it's got a long and deep history that really started with the real estate side. Now, what is the purpose? Is to make sure that these costs aren't being inflated to the consumer, that they aren't getting pushed into a deal that, is going to cost them more because it's a referral. Because somebody else is getting compensated for it. Definition of a mortgage broker. Think about a mortgage broker versus a mortgage banker. The fact that the banker actually provides the funds at the closing table, the mortgage broker does not, that they are an intermediary, and that they are a loan arranger. They arrange for the financing. So when you see these words on the screen, they aren't as overwhelming when you dig into it a little bit. Now, how can you use this? One, if you're a company owner or a hiring manager, this is the stuff you need. And if you've got some folks that need a little extra attention, this is exactly what they need. So whether it's, people have reached out to us and said, hey, how can we bump up our pass rates? We had a group that came in under 58%, and we were able to get them over 81% pass rate. And we really think that you can go as far as you want to. Now, can you ever have a perfect pass rate? I seriously doubt it, but you could probably get really close. But the secret is not just what you're doing here. It's looking at the entire process of onboarding somebody. If you want to get your rates really, really high, your pass rates as high as possible, do you want to do something in the pre-hire phase? Do you want to do an assessment that somebody takes before they even come on board with you? Or do you want to work with a provider like us to put together a course that really kind of gets them ready for that 20-hour course? And maybe utilize some of the test prep and the study sessions afterwards and kind of package that all together so that you have really a comprehensive plan to pass rather than take the class, sign up for the test. What this can be used for on the outline is a student can look through here and go, do I really know these? If I don't know these things, then I need to dig back into these. As a company or working with your provider, you can say, hey, here are some of the key areas that we want to make sure that we address, or pair off some of the bigger concepts that you can pre-teach. We've developed some tools around this. We'd be happy to show them to you. Or if you have questions, the majority of what we do is answer questions all day and talk about the industry, and we're always happy to do that too. That's RESPA. You can see how it goes down to ECOA. When you get started with ECOA, you see some of the other subtopics listed there. And then we'll bounce over here to the second part of ECOA here. One example of what I was talking about earlier as far as terminology being a little different, elderly. You know that under ECOA that everybody has to be treated equally, and it cannot be based on age except for two things. Number one, are they old enough to contract? If they're old enough to contract, then guess what? They can apply for financing. They cannot be discriminated based on age. But keep in mind the word elderly, right? So instead of discrimination based on age, specifically think of elderly people. If somebody's 80 years old and they apply for a loan, that needs to be treated the same as anyone else, right? The other thing with elderly you have to remember is the only time it's okay to discriminate on credit for someone that's elderly is a reverse mortgage, where you have to be at least 62 to be a borrower on a reverse mortgage. So those are some examples of really this does kind of help focus or tweak things a little bit as well. Under TILA, you see right to rescind, permissible fees and charges, advertising, a huge focus of TILA. Core concepts, that didn't really tell us, but knowing TILA, that's actually one of the things that we've been doing. So under TILA, you see some of the topics, right to rescind, permissible fees, advertising, core concepts, all of what you would normally associate that you would know. At the bottom, you see seller contributions, kind of reminding you of that particular topic. And then you have HOPA or high cost loans listed and broken out, and then higher priced after that and LO comp after that. TRID is over to the right. It's nice to have that because it really does break that out as a separate topic. That's kind of how we cover it in our course. Good to see some ideas along those lines. And then HMDA, Fair Credit Reporting Act, also listed there as well. Red flags rule, BSA, AML, GLB, MAP rule, E-Sign Act, Patriot Act, kind of all the usual suspects that you might be following, but at the same time, you can see this thing's 19 pages. So we've got no shortage of detail underneath all of those sections. General mortgage knowledge, knowledge that applies to the industry, and mortgage loan products, terms used here in the lower right, and then MLO activities. It's kind of funny because we actually designed our book in the same way. We kind of walk through the origination process and then talk about where everything fits in. We talk about the history from beginning to end and then the MLO process from beginning to end as well. Processing and underwriting, closing, financial calculations, all the usual suspects there, ethics, ethical behavior, fair lending, fraud detection, advertising, good to see those there. And then the uniform state content to finish everything off at the end. The references here I would point out at the back. Sometimes when people see this, they're like, oh, great, we have all these references. We can utilize these to study for the test. In reality, usually get a little bit of the way into this and realize this is an overwhelming amount of info. But we think how this stuff should be used is as you study, use your book, use the course that you're taking, learn as much as possible. And then if you have a question or something that's just not making sense, even though you've read it a couple times, then look at it from a different angle by by utilizing some of these resources. If finance charges are just something you can't get your head wrapped around, go to the resources back here, dig through them, find that topic, and then look at those particular issues. Sometimes it takes a couple of angles of looking at something before you really have it click. That's what we think these resources are really good for. All right, well, we hope this has been helpful to you. Obviously, we invite you to call us and participate in any of our trainings. We do really focus on you and delivering value for what you do and making sure that you have the most current, up-to-date available info and instructors that will talk to you. I know, shocking, right? They're actually available on the phone or via email. So anyway, thank you guys for listening. We wish you guys the best in a great industry and for the best possible year you can have. It's a great industry. It's a pleasure. It's a privilege. And thank you guys for being here. Take care and best for a great year.